The Daybell case centers around the death of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Now, Lori Daybell and Charles Vallow, she was then Lori Vallow. She has since married Chad Daybell. But the state has said that they believe she conspired with her brother to shoot and kill her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. And so her brother has passed away since, but that's Alex Cox. And he said during that shooting in July of 2019 that he shot and killed Charles Vallow, in self-defense. Um, that is the same type of defense that Lori has put up here. Granted, she didn't have a defense. The prosecution rested last week, and within minutes she said, well, I'm going to rest. But then the judge gave her till Monday, said, hey, are you sure? That means you can't testify. And she stuck to her guns up until yesterday, said, no, I'm going to rest. I'm not going to bring any witnesses forward. I'm not going to bring any additional evidence forward. I'm not going to testify myself. And relied on her closing argument to try and persuade the jury here. So while the state is saying there was a conspiracy, there was an agreement beforehand to make this happen. And Daybell, on the other hand, has been saying, no, this was simply a quote family tragedy, and that a family tragedy is not a crime. And that's kind of what she has been saying this whole time. She's been trying to poke holes in the prosecution, trying to say, well, asking the witnesses that have come up throughout the course of this trial, have you specifically seen me have any kind of conspiracy with my brother? Have you seen basically smoking gun evidence of this? And they have said no. However, all of the circumstantial evidence points to there being an agreement. And so I think it is interesting, jury has been deliberating since 10:30 this morning, and we just have been waiting to see what is going on here. But I do want to bring in Rachel Smith. She was the special prosecutor, one of the prosecutors up in Idaho, for the other case that Daybell was in and convicted for the murder of her children. Granted, that information can't be used in this case, Rachel. We know that a verdict is in. As a prosecutor, as somebody who's been through this before, especially even with a Daybell case, what's going through your mind when this is happening?
Thank you very much. That's a great question. The information about the children's death, about the conspiracy to kill Tammy conviction, may be used in the next phase upon conviction. So it's not that it has no place. It's just not in this case. It's not part of the conviction consideration for guilt. But what's going through my mind is, they had an hour and a half lunch. So while they've been going since 10:30. They had that hour and a half lunch. So this is a fairly quick verdict. It may not feel that way to those of us who followed it for the last 5 and 6 years, but for the jury, that's a pretty quick verdict, which in my experience means a guilty. I'm going to knock on wood. I don't want to jinx anything, but I think it's a good sign. The evidence was very clear, detailed, thorough, methodical, showing that Lori conspired and ultimately succeeded in killing her husband, Charles Vallow.
And Rachel, we talked about this yesterday, that they had to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was an agreement. Tell me in your expert opinion, what were the nail in the coffin circumstantial evidence? Because we know for jurors, it's harder to try and take a puzzle piece of information and make a full picture here. What are the most important puzzle pieces in this trial?
The most important puzzle pieces, and kudos to law enforcement for getting them, it's the iClouds. Lori's own words, Lori's own actions convicted her. The words she used were very clearly instruction, manipulation, and control over Alex. Stay by me. that it's coming to a head this week, you know, we will be like, I'm told I will be like Nephi, and so will you. Lori's own words are what established the conspiracy, which showed her control over Alex. And then her words afterwards showed her motive, her intent, and her desire for her husband's death. And all of that evidence came in and was very clear to the jury.
And looking obviously next, we talked about this yesterday as well, but this is not the one and done trial here. You get this one, but then you go into an aggravation phase, then you go into sentencing. However, there's a whole nother one. There's another attempted murder conspiracy to commit murder case against Boudreaux. And you believe that this, whatever happens here in the next 20 minutes or 10 minutes here, could have a direct impact on that next case.
Yes, I think if the information related to Brandon is allowed to be used in aggravation, and therefore he's had his say and it affected the outcome, it's possible Maricopa County will decide not to proceed. However, with the if that doesn't happen, Brandon deserves his day in court, and I'm really hopeful Maricopa goes forward with that, even with the conviction for Charles.
And we saw closing arguments yesterday. 1 hour 45 minutes from prosecution, 20 minutes for Daybell. What does that say about the overall strength of both sides here?
I think it's less about the strength of both sides, because this prosecution has outstanding evidence on this issue, and very hopeful that the jury saw it very quickly. It really had more to do with Lori being her own lawyer. A seasoned defense attorney would have gone as long and tried to explain away that overwhelming evidence. I don't think they would have been successful, but I think the length of the arguments really was just another example of how Lori is her own worst enemy.
And I am going to also try and bring in our second analyst, Ben Taylor, who is a local attorney here. Ben, what did you take from the closing arguments, and what is going through your mind now that we're 9 minutes away from everyone entering in the courtroom?
I mean, this is going to be a verdict of guilty. We all know that. I don't think it'd be any surprise, but I was kind of surprised that the jurors didn't ask one question, because if they asked one question, that means they would be confused about something. But the fact that they didn't ask one question, they came here, they spoke. Their verdict is going to be spoken on the record this afternoon. But if they were confused, they would have at least had one or two questions. This is a very, very quick verdict. They only deliberated for a couple hours. So I'd be highly surprised if it's a not guilty. I'd be highly surprised. So this is definitely a guilty verdict. I agree with Rachel. The evidence was so big against her, and we will see that. But one thing to note, Lori Daybell can ask the jurors to speak their verdict out loud, and she might. That means the judge will ask each and every juror to go around the room and say, is this your true and correct verdict? And if one juror is like, well, no, then we may have a problem there. But I highly doubt that. I think all 12 jurors will go around and say, yes, I'm guilty. This is my correct verdict.
Do you feel like she might try and self-represent in the next one, or do you think she's learned a lesson here on this one, Rachel?
I think it's going to be hard for Lori Vallow to let anyone else be in charge. I think we've seen 2 weeks of her playing a lawyer on TV. I think she's liked it. I think this is going to be her last moment in the sun.
And Ben, going to you, you have also had experience in murder cases and things like this. You said that it is common for somebody to represent themselves in smaller cases, but not in a case of this size. For you, do you feel like this is exactly how you expected it to go? All of the objections, all of that, or were there some twists and turns here that had you given pause for a second?
The very first day I heard that she's going to be representing herself in front of a jury, it's hard for a normal attorney who practices law for many years to do a murder case. That's a lot of evidence, a lot of research and writing. For her, Lori Daybell, to try to do it with no training, no legal experience, I mean, she had a very uphill battle a hard road to climb. And I knew as soon as she said, I'm representing myself, that it's probably going to be a guilty verdict because we discussed earlier, she was asking a bunch of questions throughout this whole trial that she didn't know the answer to. And these witnesses were just hammering her with this evidence. They were just saying things that was hurting her. If she had known the right questions to ask, if she had an attorney, they would have been able to at least maybe even, get a hung jury here. But I think we're going to have a straight conviction of all 12 jurors. But I think her best hope is to have an attorney to try to get a hung jury here, have a 1 into 2 jurors confused on the evidence and say, I don't know. But in the future trial, who knows what she's going to do? She might just continue it on and represent herself.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. And I wanted to also thank Rachel. She had to hop off right now, but I'm so glad that we continue to have you as we're leading up into this verdict. We're counting down some of the minutes. Rachel had to leave. Ashley Holden is in the courtroom right now. She said that timing is going to be probably roughly around 3:30 for it to be read. We're on a 5-minute delay for the courtroom. So we'll be here live with everything as we see it happen. And also we have our anchors outside as well to get reaction from folks. A lot of people are asking why do something like this when she's already been convicted in the murders of her own children in Idaho. Ben, so I'll ask you the question that people started this whole trial with. Why do this?
Why do this? I mean, that's the $1 million question. I think everybody wants to know. Some people have said that she's representing herself because she wants to get this done with. I mean, you have to have a speedy trial. So a normal attorney would probably have continued this case and waited to gather more evidence to do witness interviews. I don't know if she's even interviewed most of her witnesses that took the stand. So I think she probably wants to maybe go back to Idaho. Sometimes people say that the jail is not a good place for you, so they'd rather go back to prison. But who knows what she's going to do. But I think she's trying to get through these cases. You do have a right to a speedy trial under the law. So I think she wants her right to her speedy trial to knock it out because she has nothing to lose here. If you think about it, she's serving life in prison already for killing her kids in Idaho. So she has nothing to lose. So she's like, let me just throw spaghetti against the wall and figure out what might happen. And she might be just trying to help that she gets a not guilty or a hung jury. But I don't think she's too concerned. It looks like it. She wants to represent herself, and she might do it in the next trial.
Certainly. I mean, and we will definitely see that. That'll be the next thing. And that I think that next trial with Boudreaux, that's scheduled for later in May. But in looking at this case, what has been the witness testimony that has stuck out to you the most, that you think that makes you so confident that they're going to come back with a guilty verdict?
One of the main things was self-defense. She kept on saying this was self-defense, that Alex, her brother, did this in self-defense. However, when the autopsy from Maricopa County, the doctor took the stand, he pretty much broke it down to say this wasn't really self-defense. There was multiple gunshot wounds. Looks like Charles was laying on his back at the time, so there was no scratches on his hands. So when you have self-defense, usually the victim might be, fighting with the shooter. Because there is no wounds on the victim except the gunshots. It was hard for Lori Daybell to say this was self-defense. There's multiple evidence, the body camera footage. If you watch the body camera footage, she was very nonchalant. Her husband is dead, had died. And you would think a person would cry, would be very sad. She was just like, it's a day in the park. So that evidence right there, the text messages, that her own words pretty much dug her own grave, because she's pretty much texting saying, we're going to dig, we that's why we got rid of them. That is damaging right there by your own text message saying that. So multiple evidence here.
Yeah. And I think there wasn't that exact text message saying, hey, Alex, this is the day, but there were plenty of hidden messages in those text messages. There was the religious aspect with the word Nephi. There have been the, obviously the financial aspect of things, checking in, sending even the information of the life insurance policy and the fact that it's been changed, sending that over to her now 5th husband, Chad Daybell. So I think what they did is they found the multiple motives and they were able to piece together what happened based on all of the evidence. They had 12 plus more than a dozen people sit on the stand and talk. We're talking personal all the way up to professional. And, I did just get a note though from Holden that they have been let into the courtroom. The family is not there yet. Prosecutor Trina Kay and the lead detective in the case are currently there in the room. And the judge is in the room right now waiting for Daybell and the jury. So we are, again, counting down. We're very close here to this. And of course, as soon as we are allowed to switch over that feed, we will certainly switch that over. But Ben, like I was saying, with all of that, those different aspects to it, do you think the religious side of things here had something to play with kind of the draw to this case, the motives behind it beyond just she could have wanted money?
Yes, I mean, this case was had like the dark side, it had religion to it. I mean, why would she even kill her kids in Idaho? And now we're here in Arizona with a case where she, killed her own husband. So I think people are just drawn by, this religion, the whole doomsday, this everything is just very like unique. Is that your everyday type of case that you see here? I mean, a woman who's accused of killing multiple people and her ex-husband and the insurance money, that the motive of $1 million out there to try to get $1 million in insurance. I think people are drawn to this case because of everything that Lori Daybell has been doing.
Yeah. And so as we're waiting to switch over the feed, we know that Lori did just walk into the courtroom. Sounds like everybody is getting ready and getting set for this. If you were to summarize the prosecution's case, how would you summarize it?
Summarize it and basically that Lori Daybell dug her own grave. She's the one who set up her own husband to get murdered here, and she's been lying throughout the trial. And the body camera footage shows that. Her own text messages show that. The autopsy shows it. And this is a clean-cut case, and you need to find her guilty.
And the jury deliberated. They had, I think they had like 17 minutes or 15 minutes of deliberation yesterday. They came back, started at 10:30, took an hour and a half break, and then they were able to come to a decision before 3 o'clock or just after 3 o'clock. You said this is a fast jury deliberation, but you said there have been jury deliberations that have been faster than you can get to the break room.
Yes, I mean, I've been involved in cases where pretty much I felt that as soon as I got into the jury room, the foreperson probably said, "Raise your hand. Who do we have here? Guilty or not guilty?" and counted on their hands, all 12 jurors, and they decided, and they came back out. That could have happened yesterday in the afternoon. They really wanted to, but it sounds like this jury wanted to go back home, have a good night's rest, get up this morning, go to the jury courthouse, have a lunch, and then come back with a decision. But it's still fairly quickly for all the amount of evidence. But you have to remember, they've been here for over 2 weeks. This is going on the third week they've been here. They've heard everything. They probably already know what their decision was, probably even yesterday. But they probably just wanted to go back and make sure, because you have to remember, you have all 12 jurors have to be unanimous for a verdict. And it sounds like right now we have all 12 jurors who are unanimous.
Yeah. And so, I mean, and of course, we'll find that out, right? You said there's two things: they could read it, or every single juror could read their decision as well. Um, let's talk the aggravation phase. Now, this is unique to Arizona, right?
Yes, I mean, in Arizona, I mean, the aggravation phase is unique. Asking juror questions is unique. So after this trial, they can go into an aggravation phase, whereas the prosecutor will stand up and say, because of these factors here, these extreme factors that Lori Daybell did, we're asking for you to aggravate her sentence, meaning giving her more time to make sure that she gets pretty much life in prison on this case. We all know that she's doing life in prison already in Idaho, but who knows? A person can overturn a case. So that's why the prosecutors are saying, let's do an aggravation phase. Let's make sure that we get her enough time. So that way, if any other her cases get overturned by a court of appeals, we at least have her guilty on this case.
Right. And so, like, let's say she wants to appeal this. She can't appeal this on grounds of improper defense, right?
No, that's one thing. Usually in a case, a defendant can say, my attorney was ineffective, and it's called ineffective assistance of counsel. In this case, because she represented herself, she pretty much waived those rights. So she can't say my advisory counsel or anybody, didn't give me the correct legal advice. Because she went to trial on her own, that right to appeal, as far as that one issue, she can appeal other issues in the case. As far as evidence should be let in or not let in, but as far as evidence, that can be appealed. But as far as her being representing herself, she can't say my attorney stinks because she was her own attorney.
Right. I feel like that would be very counter to the whole thing with that. So she still does have a door open should this come down with a guilty verdict. There are still some things that she can poke some holes in. We saw during her closing arguments, she really, really wanted to make sure that the jury watched her full interview, or as much as the interview that she gave to police on that day. But it doesn't seem like it 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 seems like, that might not have actually had that big of a swaying effect on the jury as she had hoped. That seemed kind of like a last ditch, "Oh, but watch everything because there might be something in there that proves that I didn't conspire on this case." There was even yesterday, like, there could be that one holdout, but, as we get closer, it seems like e with the speed of this is pretty quick.
Yes, it could have been a hung jury, but this case is very, very quick. It doesn't sound like there's any holdouts. They have a unanimous verdict, and we will see it live once the cameras go into the courtroom. But she had an uphill battle here. There was really nothing that she could do. That's why you didn't really see her asking that many questions. That way, she didn't even testify in her case. She didn't call one single witness. So
Yeah.
when you don't call a witness, when you don't testify, you just know that you probably are not going to win the case.
Hmm. I'm hearing from Ashley Holden in the courtroom. It sounds like they're waiting on a few people who might be called in as witnesses for the potential aggravation phase. So that is possible for them to almost have a mini trial for the aggravation phase.
Yes, so they can call witnesses, any sort of evidence. And it's a mini trial. So the prosecutor will present evidence, will argue to the jury, and the jurors will go back in the jury room to deliberate and say, we believe that there were aggravating factors, or they can say, no, we don't believe there's not any aggravating factors. So it's like a mini little trial.
But the aggravation phase can't change the verdict. Once the verdict is read and in, you go into this second phase. But that the only thing that can change though is the sentencing.
Exactly. Yeah. No, once she's convicted, she is convicted. The jurors will just decide whether or not they should give her a higher sentence based upon the aggravating factors. Lori can say, well, I don't believe these are aggravating factors. So it'd be interesting to see if she gets up and say, don't aggravate my sentence here. She's not being sentenced today, but this determines how her sentence will be in the future. So it'd be interesting to see if she gets up and decides to fight against the aggravating factors that the prosecutor is going to argue.
You know, could this impact the next case here in Maricopa County? She still has another one to face.
Yes, people have heard this case. It's been all on the news, so this could affect maybe getting a fair juror to see if any jurors have heard about this case or don't know about it. You got to be living under a rock not to heard about this case. But part of jury selection is making sure that you have fair jurors, no matter if you're on the prosecution side or the defense side. But this could affect her case, as people are going to hear about this, whether or not she will ask for a fair trial, even ask for it to be moved to a different city because of this conviction going forward right now.
Yeah, and like I said, we're gonna find that out. We know that they went into a slight break, and we're waiting for them to come back from that break once they can get a few people. How fast is an aggravation phase after a conviction like this? Could it go longer? Would they have a 2-day one, or is it more like we're getting it all done before 5 o'clock and it's over?
I think the prosecutors want to get it done quick. I think they're going to present the evidence probably within 5 to 10 minutes. Lori Daybell can get up there and refute any of the evidence. Then the jurors stand up, they go back into the deliberate this only on the aggravating factors. And I believe usually it's pretty quick. So we should have the aggravating factors within like 5 to 10 minutes.
You know, Ben, I was thinking about this today, and obviously we know that the jury has to be impartial. They can only look at the evidence that was presented, nothing else. They can't look at what wasn't presented. They can't even look at any of the Idaho cases. But it's honestly it's interesting to me to think, well, then are these juries thinking about where's Tylee in all of this? You know, just trying to get into the mind of somebody who's sitting there who maybe hasn't heard about what happened in Idaho or hasn't been following this, and those questions that they might have had um, going into deliberation. The jury's made up of 12 men, 2 women. I don't really think that's going to have much of an impact on this verdict, as we're going to see in a few minutes here. Um, what did you think about some of the testimony from the family members? So we're talking Kay Woodcock, who is the sister of Charles Vallow. And then we had Adam Cox, her other brother, Lori Daybell's brother. And they both answered the same questions from Lori, which was, did you specifically see me conspire with my brother to kill my fourth husband? And both of them said no, but both of them also said in their own ways, you know, I think Kate, she directly said, all the evidence points to you doing that. And then, um, you know, her other brother, Adam, said, well, no, but I have no doubt in my body that you didn't do this. So, or that you did do this. So I was wondering if, they're saying no, right? They're being like, well, no, I didn't see that, might impact it. But do you think that their responses had any sway?
Oh, for sure. These are family members of the victim, and those responses are strong. And the fact that they say, I might have heard you or seen you do it, but the evidence pretty much is overwhelming that you did it. And that goes back to asking questions of witnesses that you shouldn't be asking questions to. One of the basic rules in Law School 101 is this: if a witness is there to hurt you, which are these family members, you don't really even have to ask them that many questions. Get them off the stand and put on your witnesses that will actually help your case. Lori Daybell knew that these witnesses were going to hurt her. So having the jurors hear from family members saying, "I believe you did kill my family member," that's going to definitely impact the jurors when they reach their verdict today.
How hard is it to prosecute a case like this?
It's very hard. I've done murder cases, I've done death penalty cases, and for the defense side. And when you do that, those cases, there's tons of evidence. I mean, thousands and thousands of pages of police reports. There's forensic evidence. It's just there's photographs, body camera. There's so much evidence. You have to pretty much put pieces of puzzle together, put a puzzle together, all this evidence, and make sure that not only you understand as an attorney, that make sure that you have to articulate it to the jurors, because the jurors are the ones who are going to decide your case. So you have to make it in small layman's terms so they understand the story, the background, and what's going on. So murder cases are the highest level of cases that you can do in criminal defense. This is a conspiracy to commit murder, but it's still a high level of case, a complex case. And usually these cases do take years. That's why it takes so long to get to trial, because you have to put in all the evidence together, and the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So they only get one bite at the apple, meaning that if she was found not guilty today, basically they can't retry her. It's called double jeopardy. So that's why it takes so long, and that's why it takes a long to put all the evidence together.
We were expecting this case to be up to 6 weeks. We're 2 weeks and 1 or 2 days into this, and we're already waiting. We're already minutes away from a verdict here. Does that say something about the prosecution's strength in their argument that they boiled it down to 2 weeks, and we're at the point where Daybell was like, I'm going to rest?
Yeah, yes. I mean, when you're going good and the train is going down the railroad, and you're winning, there's no use of keep talking. There's no use of putting on more evidence, which can maybe backfire. So the prosecutor must have felt pretty good here. We called our witnesses. There's no use of doing anything else. the questions were in the prosecutor's favor. So the prosecutor probably felt pretty confident and say, hey, I'll rest here in 2 weeks, which is very quick for a murder case.
I also want to bring Dwayne Cates in, also another amazing analyst, an attorney in the area who has plenty of experience in this. Dwayne, you have had experiences also in the conspiracy to commit murder side of things with these cases. And I was just talking with Ben, asking him how difficult it is to either defend in this case or try a case like this. In your experience, tell me, what makes it different for this type of case versus a clean and cut, he said, she said, they killed, he killed?
Well, conspiracy is all about the question. Okay. And so that's what's going on. I don't know, something going on with my camera. But I know. Hang on. There we go.
All good.
My flap came down. So anyway, so with conspiracy cases, it's all about a question. Okay. You can be walking down the street with a bale of marijuana under each arm and not be guilty of conspiracy to possess marijuana for sale, because conspiracy is all about an agreement between two people. And if they can't prove an agreement between two people, nothing else matters, because that's what there has to be, an agreement to commit a crime and a step towards that crime. And so, in this case, I mean, they clearly got a crime, but did they prove that there was an agreement between the people? And they kind of did with the, with some of the, peripheral, information, but there's no dead, a lot of times you got to text messages where two people are talking about killing somebody, you know, almost explicitly. And those are the easy ones. This one's a little tougher.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And Ben, I want to thank you. I know you have to head out right now, but your analysis is fantastic. We hope to see you later on afterwards. Dwayne, we'll continue the conversation a little bit in your experience. And like you said, sometimes you need that smoking gun. But we saw that jury's been deliberating since 10. They took an hour and a half break. Is this quick in your opinion for them to come back? Or do you think there was a little bit of tension behind the scenes?
Well, in a murder case, despite what people say, in murder cases, juries really try to get it right. They really do. They try really hard. And so even if they were kind of dead set on a verdict one way or the other at the very beginning, they're going to at least take some time to discuss it and discuss the evidence, and everybody should get a chance to talk about what they think of the evidence and what they think of the case. And that takes a couple hours, even if they all voted guilty, when they first went back there. Most juries want to take some time to talk about it, because they want to make sure they get it right, because they understand that this is a first degree murder case.
Yeah, I mean, and even though she has been convicted in the murders of her own children up in Idaho, they can't bring that up to the jury here. The jury is not allowed to basically even know or look at that information whatsoever. So they're just looking at the circumstantial evidence that was brought up. And so, just real quick, as I'm getting live updates, I'm also kind of reading out to you guys. We're learning that the judge is back in court. Again, we're still in that 5-minute feed delay. We know that they were waiting for some more folks possibly to show up who might be called as witnesses for a potential aggravation phase after the jury is called. I mean, do you feel like, Dwayne, that this could be a guilty verdict here?
It can always be a guilty verdict, and it could be a not guilty verdict. Okay, that's the interesting thing about jury trials. You just, it's kind of like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get in the end.
Yeah, we know that right now in court, Kay Woodcock, who is the sister of Charles Vallow, and we know Brandon Boudreaux is also in there. He's going to be in the second case here in Maricopa County to see, how that goes. Obviously, we'll be covering that in late May. But do you feel like the prosecution had enough in this case?
They probably did. They did it. The prosecutor in this case is good, and she's methodical, and she went down. She went through it step by step. So, I I don't know that there's going to be any surprises in this, but you just never really know. And I'm guessing if it was going to be a not guilty verdict, it would have taken longer to turn people around. And so a verdict of this length is probably going to be not guilty. But God, you just never know. I hate to guess because
Right.
you never know.
Right. And like I was saying yesterday, the word yesterday was flexibility because we didn't know up until the moment that she, said that she rested her case, we didn't know. And so we're counting down. We're officially 5 minutes away from being able to switch our feet over to the courtroom and see what's happening. So we'll kind of talk for 5 minutes and then we will make sure that we are sending you as soon as we possibly can. Everybody is currently in the courtroom right now. This is exactly what we're getting from our Ashley Holden, who's been amazing in reporting from court, and the jury has now entered the courtroom as well. So in your brain, put your hat on. You're in at the very end of all of this. What are you thinking if you were standing there in the courtroom?
Well, when you're sitting in the courtroom and there's a verdict and you're just waiting for everybody to get in place so they can take the verdict. The air in the courtroom is like you can cut it with a knife. You can cut the tension in the courtroom with a knife. I mean, even though people think they know how this is going to turn out, nobody really knows, and until the verdict's read, nobody's really gonna know. But
Yeah.
it is gut wrenching for both sides.
And
Everybody.
Dwayne, sorry to cut you off. We did just find out that they read and that she is guilty. So like you said, so now we know that Lori Daybell is guilty in the conspiracy to commit murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. So we are going to cut to that broadcast coverage so that you guys can see that guilty right now.
Out here, we're waiting for that jury's decision. We are on a 5-minute court-ordered delay. So the verdict will be read there in the courtroom, and then 5 minutes, the clock will be ticking. We will be able to get it out to you. You'll be able to see exactly what happened there inside the courtroom. We do know the jurors are back in the courtroom right now. So you explained that this is a conspiracy to murder Lori Daybell's fourth husband. His name was Charles Vallow. He was shot to death in the family home in 2019 by Lori Daybell's brother, Alex Cox. That is not under dispute. He was shot twice. She says it was self-defense. The state certainly says it was murder, and that the second shot really shows that it was indeed murder. But the charge itself is actually conspiracy to commit murder. Again, all of this predates the disappearance and eventual murder of her two children, JJ and Tylee, up in Idaho. For that, she was convicted for that, and she was sentenced to what they call LWOP. It's life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of her two children there. She had been serving time behind bars at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center. It is a max security facility in Idaho, and she was brought down here to Arizona to face the charges here. Again, the conspiracy to kill Charles Vallow, her fourth husband, who was shot in the Chandler home in 2019. Now, notably, in all of this, she did act as her own attorney, and I'm just receiving information from the courtroom right now. ABC 15's Ashley Holden is in there for us right now, and we have learned that the jury has decided that Lori Daybell is guilty of conspiring to murder her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. The jury coming back, about 24 hours of deliberation, jury coming back with that guilty verdict. Again, we are on a court-ordered delay right now, but we will bring you those moments from inside the courtroom as soon as we're able. But a couple things come up with this. One is that you're held to the same standard as a true attorney would be in court. And you do have the ability to change your mind at any time. She did not. And it is not grounds for appeal. If you do not do a vigorous job, a good job in your own defense, it is not grounds for appeal that you acted as your own attorney. And again, she was found guilty by this jury that we have here at Maricopa County Superior Court. We know there are 12 men and 2 women, including the alternates. They work at the TSA. One works for a canning company. At least one we know was retired. Prosecution called over a dozen witnesses. They rested their case in 7 court days. Lori Daybell did not choose to present a defense. She also notably did not choose, as part of that, to take the stand herself. One of those reasons is likely because if she would have taken the stand to tell her own story in direct testimony, she would have been open to cross-examination again by the prosecution. So she did not present a defense. She did present closing arguments, but again, arguments are different than evidence. So again, we know that the verdict is guilty. We should be able to turn that around for you any moment now. We're told from our Ashley Holden, who is again inside the courtroom right now, that we are going to the aggravation phase of this trial. There may be witnesses called in that, Javier, and we're going to be doing that immediately. So as soon as we have that verdict, we're going to get that right back out to you.
Yeah, we are working on that. As you mentioned, we're on a 5-minute delay to turn that information around. But just to reiterate exactly what Faye has said, Lori Vallow has been found guilty of conspiring to murder her 4th husband, Charles Vallow. Now, he was shot and killed back in July of 2019. We are on a 5-minute delay. We will get that video in. We will be able to turn that and then show you exactly what happened in that courtroom, whether there was reaction, whether there was gas or anything else. So actually, we have that in right now. Why don't we go ahead and take a listen?
State of Arizona versus Lori Daybell, CR 2021-001704-001, verdict count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Lori Daybell, as to the crime of count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder occurring on or about July 11, 2019, guilty.
Well, there you have it right there. The one charge, as you just heard, that's what was played out in the courtroom here in Maricopa County. Conspiracy to commit murder from July 11th of 2019. That was her 4th husband, Charles Vallow, found guilty. We want to toss it back out to Faye Fredericks. We know you've been on standby for the last couple days out there. What's, if any reaction outside the courthouse right now?
Well, that's one of the things that we are going to be looking for, because we have certainly some notable people that are inside the courtroom. We know that that her Daybell's niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreau, is in the courtroom right now, as well as other members of the family. Kate Woodcock, who is Daybell's sister, also in the courtroom right now. So we're working to get some reaction from them, as well as anybody else who may have been in the courtroom right now. We've got our Ashley Holden inside that courtroom right now handling all of that. You know, one of the things I think that might be an interesting question to talk about, Javier, is this idea that because Lori Daybell had already been convicted in Idaho of the killing of the 2 children, JJ and Tylee, and had been sentenced to, again, what criminal defense attorneys call LWOP, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Why bring her here to Arizona and to face charges here as well, because she's not getting out of prison because of that conviction up in Idaho? And what I'm told by criminal defense attorneys is this is really about justice for Charles Vallow, and that his family and his friends feel that they are getting the justice they deserve here in the Arizona courts. Again, our Ashley Holden has said that they're moving immediately to the aggravation phase of this case right now, of this trial, that will possibly include more witnesses. We will be working to find out anything we can from here at Maricopa County Superior Court. And again, Ashley's working this case from inside the courtroom right now, and we will have her with us shortly, Javier.
one more trial here in Arizona. And as you said, for them to seek justice. There have been many twists and turns in this case over the last 5 years. But to reiterate one more time, Lori Daybell has been found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. That just came down about 5 minutes ago. We played that for you just a few minutes ago. We have somebody inside, our Ashley Holden, who has been covering this case extensively from the very beginning. She will have more reaction shortly as we continue to cover this. But again, this is only the first of two trials that will happen here in Arizona. Now, to just backtrack and give you a little more, the prosecution had rested on Wednesday. Then they turned to the defense, which, of course, Lori Daybell was handling her own defense, and they asked her if she wanted to call any witnesses. Now, she said she was going to rest. They then gave her some time until Monday morning to decide whether she wanted to rest the case or whether she wanted to call in witnesses. And many had wondered whether she would take the stand herself. But as Faye had mentioned, if she were to take the stand herself and testify, then she would open up for cross-examination. We want to get back out to our Faye Frederick. She's outside the courthouse right now with more. Faye.
Yeah, Javier, we've just learned that Lori Daybell has now left the courtroom after that guilty verdict from the jury. Again, 12 men and 2 women, including those alternates. They deliberated for roughly 24 hours. They got the case late in the day yesterday. They briefly met, decided to call it a day, went home, came back, started up their deliberations at 10:30 this morning. They went for about an hour and a half, broke for lunch, and then came back. And then it was, I would say, around 3 o'clock when we heard the word that they had reached a verdict. At that point, the judge said, we're going to give the family members time to come back into the courtroom. They were going to bring Daybell back into the courtroom so that that verdict could be read. Again, the verdict in the conspiracy to murder Charles Vallow, Lori Daybell's fourth husband, guilty. That is what a jury of her peers has decided. Charles Vallow was shot in the family home in Chandler in 2019 by her Lori Daybell's brother, Alex Cox. Now, she says it was in self-defense. Cox later died of apparent natural causes. That happened just months after that shooting. Again, as you mentioned, Daybell did not present a defense. She did have closing arguments, but arguments and evidence are two different things that certainly seem to weigh in the minds of the jury. This case here in Arizona actually predates the case that she is most notorious for, and that is, of course, is the death of her 2 children, the murder of her 2 children there in Idaho, where she was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was brought here to Arizona to face these murder conspiracy charges. And again, we want to bring you that moment in the courtroom where she learned her fate on the conspiracy to kill, the conspiracy to murder Charles Vallow, her fourth husband. Go ahead and listen in.
State of Arizona versus Lori Daybell, CR 2021-001704-001, verdict count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Lori Daybell, as to the crime of count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder occurring on or about July 11, 2019, guilty.
Okay, there you heard it from the jury. Lori Daybell guilty of conspiring to murder her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. A jury just deciding that moments ago, bringing that information to you. Our ABC15's Ashley Holden has been inside the courtroom the entire time. She's going to join me here shortly, but I can tell you they have moved immediately to the aggravating phase of this case. And also now the question becomes, of course, when are we going to have sentencing and what will that look like? So one of the things that's been notable certainly about this, Javier, is that Lori Daybell acted as her own attorney. We've talked a little bit about some of the concerns as a defendant that you would have about something like that you are held to the same standard as a regular attorney, but that you do have the option to change your mind at any time. And she did have public defenders on standby to assist her if she did want any legal counsel from them. I'm told by criminal defense attorneys that will now extend into the sentencing phase of this case, that she can choose to represent herself as she's been doing, or she could change her mind and she could say, no, I do want attorney representation and I do want a public defender to help, or she would even have the ability to hire a private attorney if she wanted to. That is where I'm hearing from criminal defense attorneys who are not directly related to this case, that just speaking on background and generally to me about how this process works.
Yeah, Faye, and if we watched, anybody out there watched the court case very closely, and we were streaming this on ABC15.com, there were a lot of objections from her cross-examining certain witnesses. A lot of people asking questions about, what she was intending to do here by representing herself. Let's backtrack a little bit, and of course the headline here is that Lori Daybell has been found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. This was in July of 2019. Of course, really, this has been a huge case that has had many twists and turns over the course of 5+ years. It took us from here in Arizona, took us to Hawaii at one point, where there was still a search for her two children, JJ and Ty Lee. It then took us back to Idaho, where unfortunately in 2020, the bodies of her two kids were found. We want to get back out to our Faye Fredericks right now. We know our Ashley Holden, who has been covering this case extensively, has now joined you. Ashley.
Yep, we just got Ashley out here from inside the courtroom. You have been watching all of the twists and turns of this. Any surprises when the verdict was read?
No, but I did see Charles Vallow's sister. She was sitting there. It seemed like she was taking some deep breaths. Obviously, you have to imagine the family probably on pins and needles, just waiting to see what happens. They've watched the Idaho cases play out, but now they are here in Arizona. So much court for them. And I could see her kind of deep breathing even after they read guilty in the courtroom. Now, after that, I do want to explain, we went to that aggravating phase of everything. Lori Daybell said she's stipulating to all the aggravating factors that they brought up. There are 3 of them. Now, I was texting some local attorneys trying to see how often does that happen. Usually this is decided by a jury. They hear witnesses. Prosecution was planning to have some family members being called up to be those witnesses. And we saw Lori Daybell say, no, I'm going to stipulate to this. And he had to ask her kind of what you hear judges ask people when they plead guilty. Not that that's what she was doing, but do you know what you're doing? Has anyone threatened you about doing this or talked you into doing this? And she said, no, this is what she wants to do. She understood what she was doing, is what she told the judge. Now, she does have those legal advisors that are sitting right next to her, but that aggravating phase, it really ended before it even began. In terms of sentencing, they kind of talked about this. Now remember, Daybell has a whole other trial, Brandon Boudreaux, which was her niece's now ex-husband. He is at the center of that, shots fired at Brandon Boudreaux. So he was sitting there in the courtroom as well, watching this verdict be read, but apparently sentencing will not happen until after that next trial. Daybell will be back in court in May. I think we have some family that is coming out. No, these are Ashley, the jurors that are coming out right now.
Okay, you know what, Ashley, I'm going to cut you loose for just a moment because I know you're going to try and go get those jurors and see if they want to talk to us right now. So I'm going to continue our broadcast here with Javier, but go ahead and let's see if we can get that and if any of the family members want to speak about the developments there in court. Okay, so Javier, obviously you've heard what Ashley had to say. Ashley, really quick as I leave you, anything notable about the demeanor of the jurors?
They all pulled them and then just said, this is our verdict. Nothing notable other than they came in, then they were, I think they, assumed that they would be coming back for that aggravating factors phase of everything, and then they were called in and released. So nothing truly notable from them. We have them walking out right now. We'll see if we can talk to them.
All right. We're going to go ahead and cut ABC 15's Ashley Holden loose so she can see if the jurors want to talk to us. It's obviously totally at their discretion if they want to or if they don't want to. But certainly I think there's a high level level of interest in this case and what went into their deliberations, especially given that the prosecution put on this very robust prosecution, and then the defense, effectively Lori Daybell, representing herself, chose not to put on a defense and move directly to closing arguments. Javier.
We only watched a snippet of it, but she had basically no reaction when the jury read that verdict. She was still in her chair and didn't move. So I'd be interested to ask Ashley what she saw from inside that courthouse. Just to reiterate here, Lori Daybell in the conspiracy to commit murder trial has been found guilty of that one count, but this is one of two trials that will take place here in Arizona. This has to do, this one where she was found guilty, this has to do from a July of 29 incident where her brother, Alex Cox, admittedly killed her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Now, she argued all along that this was in self-defense and tried to call this a family tragedy. However, the prosecution from the beginning said that she was part of this conspiracy to kill her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. There was some question about insurance money that she was possibly after, and in fact, they put someone on the stand at one point, and this was probably one of the pivotal moments of that trial, where this was a woman who apparently went out on a date with Charles Vallow and said that he had expressed to her how he had changed the benefactor to his insurance policy, and it was no longer Lori Daybell. So this has had many twists and turns. We know a lot of people have been watching this court case very closely because it went from Idaho, where she was found guilty in the murders of her two children, spending life in prison with no possibility of parole, then coming here to face this single charge of conspiracy to commit murder, and now a second charge in a later trial date. And as Ashley just mentioned, this has to do with Brandon Boudreaux, who is Lori's niece's ex-husband, and apparently he was in that courtroom as well. So many twists and turns. We know a lot of people are starting to come outside of the courthouse. Anything that stands out to you right now, Faye?
Well, yeah, I mean, we just had the jury come by here a short moment ago, and Ashley Holden went after them to see if they want to discuss their decision, what brought them to this unanimous guilty verdict. And in fact, we have one of those jurors live right now. Let's go ahead and listen in.
Didn't seem to take anything very seriously.
Were you hoping to hear it? How much of that did that play into a factor in the decision?
It did.
Were you hoping to hear her testify? Were you hoping to hear her call witnesses?
I was.
And what about you?
I didn't understand why she didn't call any witnesses.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't get that.
Or why she didn't have, like, I know she made a statement about the only family that was interviewed was her estranged brother, and why wasn't her parents or her sister, but yet she didn't call them.
So, I mean, in saying that, she is not obligated to prove her innocence.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you gave her that benefit of the doubt. She recognized she didn't have to put on the defense.
She knew.
Right,
yeah,
right.
She knew.
Was the fact that she didn't put up a defense or take the stand in her own defense part of your deliberation at all?
No. It was all evidence. It was all evidence that was produced and presented to us.
Sorry if this was asked. What would you say the biggest piece of evidence for you guys as a jury was when you came to the decision?
Well, for me, like her, it was text.
The text
were
history.
damning.
What text?
What specifically about the text?
I don't know.
Oh, there were so many.
I don't know if I can do that or not. Yeah, there was.
I mean,
there
we
was
had
two of them
pages.
for me that really stood out.
Can you tell us which ones?
The Nephi.
Yeah, that was one of them. Soon you will be Nephi, and so will I. So that was one of them, but I don't know if I should say anything more than that.
We heard so much about dark spirits and religion and how this all plays into it. I mean, as a jury, what's going through your head when you start hearing that in court?
For me, that didn't really play a big role because you have to have evidence of conspiracy, and that is not evidence of conspiracy to me.
Was it
possessed.
unusual for you guys to? I mean, you're talking about her brother Alex, the guy who actually that was the triggerman. So many players were referenced in this trial, and you never saw them. Never heard
Correct.
from them. It had to be confusing when
It
you
was
guys got
very
back
confusing.
in the jury room. Yeah?
Yeah, it was very confusing. It just felt like there was so much of the story that was missing.
Did she have any valid arguments, like anything that made you think maybe she's not guilty?
Do you want to answer? I can't think of any.
You know, honestly, up until yesterday, I would have said not guilty. But when the prosecutor, I don't know, what do they call that? When they give their
Closing argument.
Yeah. Yes, the closing
Connected
argument.
the
That's
dots.
really, there's a few things she said in there, and then when I looked them up today, I was like, oh yeah, that's bad.
And you were still on the fence yesterday.
I was yesterday. Yes.
Give us a sense of what it was like to be in that jury room. Was there a point that someone was disagreeing, saying that maybe she is not guilty?
Yes.
Were you guys
There's
all-
a couple.
And what was that like? Walk us through that.
It's just a matter of, adults working things out and going through all the evidence and figuring out, what we thought, what we were going to come to an agreement with. So
To learn now that everyone that was in that house that day, minus Daybell, is all not with us anymore, is dead or has been killed. I mean, what is that like to hear as jurors walking out?
Sad. Like, I kept wanting to hear from Tylee.
I was going to ask, is anybody wondering why Tylee wasn't testifying?
Yes.
You were.
Did you ever ask the judge why aren't they here?
No. And the one witness that really got to me was hearing Kay. I was holding back my emotions.
Thank you guys
Can
so
y'all
much.
spell your names for us?
Yes.
her name's Carl, Karl.
And your last name, are you comfortable sharing
No.
that? No. Okay.
Victoria Lewis, Lewis.
Thank you guys.
Well,
We
we're very
appreciate
grateful.
it. And I know this is a lot, so thank you.
Thank you very much, folks.
Really appreciate it.
I love your Fox News.
That's her.
You have been listening to some of the comments from some of the jurors in the Lori Daybell trial, what resonated with them, some of the things they considered, some of the things that they really didn't take put too much stock in as they deliberated for about 24 hours here at Maricopa County Superior Court. We are awaiting a news conference that's expected to get going shortly. Our Ashley Holden has been with those jurors. She's just making her way back to our camera position here. So as soon as she gets here, we'll bring her in and have her describe what else she heard from those jurors. Several of them, again, speaking to us outside of court after the jury verdict was read guilty on the conspiracy to murder Lori Daybell's fourth husband, Charles Vallow, who was shot to death in the family home back in 2019 by Lori Daybell's brother, Alex Cox. Cox then died a few months later of apparent natural causes. Here comes Ashley Holden.
Yes.
We'll let her get a mic on real quick. I know you were sprinting down
Yes.
there after the jurors. So one of the things that really just resonated and almost shocked me, I will tell you, was it sounds like at least one of the jurors did not know that the two children that Lori Daybell was convicted of killing in Idaho, they didn't know that those children were dead.
Yeah, they were just talking to us about that. They said that it seemed like there were so many missing puzzle pieces in the story. They really wanted to hear from Tylee and to learn now as they walk out that everyone inside the home that day, minus Lori Daybell herself, have been killed or they are no longer with us. They are just learning those facts right now. Now, I did ask, was there any piece of evidence that really kind of stuck with you? And they said the text messages. And they said that there were a lot of them. From the mention of
What
Nephi.
were the text messages about? Walk everybody through that.
From the messages of Nephi, so the prosecution said that they were using this extreme religious beliefs to kind of say that this was a justified killing. So those text messages, and then we saw others, right, about the life insurance policy between Lori Daybell and her now fifth husband. And so we talked about that. But I do want to say one of the jurors we just talked to, he said that he was on the fence until closing arguments.
Yeah. We want to play you a little bit of sound that Ashley just got here from one of the other jurors. Let's go ahead and listen into that. Oh, I'm sorry, it's live right now, so let's go ahead and listen into what this juror is saying.
pieces in the trial, the people who didn't testify. You had really, there were a lot of holes when you went into the jury room that were not explained to you. That must have made it more difficult.
It did, which is why we went back through everything, just to make sure we didn't miss anything, to make sure that we were 100% on what we were choosing to do.
Was there anything that made you think she might not be guilty?
No.
When you went back to the deliberation room, were there any jurors that were uncertain and some that were certain? Where did you start? What was the foundation for deliberations?
I think probably 10 out of 12 of us were certain. The other two, we helped them go back to what they needed to learn to kind of make up their mind. And then, we just kind of went from there.
Did you guys look at any additional evidence once you were back there? Because I know that not all of the evidence was presented in court, and they said there was additional. Lori asked you to watch the entire interview, for example.
Yes.
And Trina Kay invited you to do the same. Did you guys do any
We
of that?
did. That was actually one of the first things we did, because what we saw was only clippets. And going back through it, it was actually kind of the whole interview that was like that. She asked us to watch the whole thing, but the whole thing was pretty much those clippets, other than her laughing, smiling about, she was kind of just at peace. Like, she was just sitting there, her legs were crossed. She was sitting all the way up on the seat with no shoes on, just her legs were crossed like she was in her own home.
Lori made a big deal out of being called nonchalant or calm throughout the entire trial. Didn't think it was really fair. Was that something that affected you guys, her calmness or nonchalantness?
Yes. Being that calm when everything happened, it's not something that you would normally be calm about. You'd expect to be sad, asking how your brother's doing, since he was the one that got injured during it too. She didn't do any of that. She already knew it happened, and she just went with it like that.
Did you want her to testify?
I guess I don't know. Yes, seeing Charles's sister's reaction when they did say she pled guilty was really relieving. It made all of us feel really good that they got justice.
Can we get your first and last name?
Natasha Smith.
Natasha Smith.
Also known as Tosh Reed Tucker, though.
Tosh Reed Tucker?
Yes.
Can you spell that?
TASS, and then my last name is Reed Tucker, REED-Tucker.
Do you plan to go watch a bunch of stuff about this case now? Or
Yes. I believe we're told that there's a Netflix documentary, and you can basically just Google it. Everything will pop up. So that's probably what I'm going to do when I get home.
You're gonna die.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes,
and
thank
you
you
really
guys.
didn't know anything about this case coming on as a juror?
No, and I told my grandma that I got requested for jury, and she asked if I know anything about it. I told her the name, and her jaw dropped. Like, I was supposed to know who she was. Like, she thought it was insane that I didn't know what was happening, but I just moved here 2 years ago as of March, so I didn't really know anything to begin with, but my grandma did, and she thought I was just crazy for not knowing.
Where'd you live previously?
Minnesota.
And so your grandmother was able to keep a tight lip on
She
things?
did, yes, she did.
Fun discussion with her.
Yeah, and I actually see her tonight too, because my mom just flew in from Minnesota, so I'm gonna go see them after this, and we're probably gonna watch everything.
We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, again, you're hearing from another one of the jurors here in the Lori Daybell case. Daybell convicted of conspiring to murder her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Just this afternoon, that jury had the case for about 24 hours. They got it late in the afternoon yesterday and had a decision by about 3 o'clock today. And then it was just the court giving everyone time to gather one more time in the courtroom, to get Lori Daybell back into the courtroom, to get family members back into the courtroom before that verdict was announced. Right now, what's happening is we we are awaiting a news conference that is going to be happening here as well. And again, our Ashley Holden, who's been inside the courtroom from the very beginning on this case, has followed every twist and turn, and there have been a lot of them. She was just speaking with those jurors. We're getting a microphone on her right now. She steps away from me, and we'll bring her back over. But some of the things we have heard now from the jurors. Ashley, come on in. Some of the things we did hear from the jurors is that they were hoping that Lori Daybell would testify in her own defense, and that we also heard, so much of this case, there was a lot of talk about evil spirits and possession, and that Lori Daybell felt that Charles Vallow had been overtaken by a spirit. They even named him Ned. Yeah. Oddly enough, of all things. What resonated really with you hearing from these jurors now after the fact?
They have continued to say it was the evidence. I even asked one of them about, hearing those dark spirits and about Z's or zombies. And I mean, that has to be odd. You're sitting there serving on a jury and this is what they're talking about. And he said, that's not what I was thinking about. I was thinking about the evidence in the case. And so we've heard from a few now that there were a few people that maybe were leaning not guilty. And they went back and they were in deliberations and they came out and they had their verdict eventually.
Yeah, I think we heard from one of the jurors who said it was basically 10-2 when they initially went in there and they kind of took their preliminary vote, if you will. I don't know if it was as formal as a vote, but had those initial discussions and said, all right, where is everyone? And 10 people are already guilty from the jump. And those 2 people, they said they sort of walked them through the evidence one more time to get to that guilty verdict.
Yeah, well, and you hear, even to hear that someone was kind of on the fence until closing. I mean, you hear all the time how important closing arguments are from attorneys, and that tells you right there how important closing arguments are. We were just talking to another juror, and she said, I had no idea about this case. She has family flying in, and she thinks that now they'll be spending time doing some research tonight. And she said that they were told that there was a Netflix documentary, and this is the first time she's hearing about it. So all of these jurors being released, I mean, you have to imagine what they're thinking. We were just in there deliberating about this woman, and now we're finding out so much more about her.
Yeah, that they couldn't use in court. Yeah. It's not that prosecutors didn't want to use that information, is that court rules did not allow them to use that information. All right, so let's talk about sentencing a little bit and where we go from here. Take us through this aggravation phase, because this was highly unusual as well.
Yeah, the jury was going to come back in, and usually this is decided by a jury. So the prosecution, they were going to call witnesses, and I believe they said they were going to have some family members that were going to come up as witnesses. They were going to give testimony during this aggravation phase. And as you can imagine, one of the aggravating factors that they were talking about was emotional and financial distress caused to the family. So you can imagine those witnesses were probably most likely going to talk a little bit about that and other things as well. But then that whole thing was over before it even started. We heard Daybell say, I'm going to stipulate to those factors, and the judge really trying to make sure that she knew what she was saying in court and what she was agreeing to, especially because she's defending herself. So I don't think, I can imagine that probably an attorney would not recommend their client do that. And so she did that in court.
Yeah, my understanding in talking to criminal defense attorneys as we've been covering this case is that it is a tough situation when somebody decides to defend themselves. It is certainly their constitutional right, but it's a tough situation in the courts all around, because attorneys have been trained for years and years and years about the court rules and what is argument and what is evidence and what the difference between those two are. And we saw very starkly in this case that Lori Daybell, despite all of the time that she has spent in court in being convicted of killing her two of her children, that she is not an attorney.
Yeah, and to think, I think it just really sticks with you to hear them say, we knew that there were so many missing pieces. Like, where are these people and why are they not being called to testify? But they still return a guilty verdict, and some of them convinced on closing arguments. I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. And that's just talking to 3 jurors.
Right. And again, 10 right from the beginning seemed to all be in agreement that guilty was the appropriate verdict in this.
Yeah.
We want to go ahead and go back to some of those jurors and listen to what they had to say.
What did you think of her defending herself? Anything that went through the jury's head with that?
Well, for me personally, I thought, what does she have to lose? It's guilty or not guilty. What does she have to lose?
For me, it was the text messages. that did it as far as evidence. And I feel like we uncovered some lies.
We heard so much about dark spirits and religion and how this all plays into it. I mean, as a jury, what's going through your head when you start hearing that in court?
For me, that didn't really play a big role because you have to have evidence of conspiracy, and that is not evidence of conspiracy to me. To say somebody is possessed her.
For you guys?
And the one witness that really got to me was hearing Kay. I was holding back my emotions.
Okay, again, some of the jurors that we heard from just moments ago following that guilty verdict in the Lori Daybell case. We now move on to sentencing. Do we know when that sentencing is expected to happen yet?
She still has another trial, so it sounds like it's going to happen after her next trial. She'll be back in court in a few weeks here. I believe it's May 14th is the date that they set. And then her next trial is supposed to start end of May, beginning of June. So we're going to see that process still play out rather quickly with a few weeks here, about a month or so in between all of this. We did just hear from that juror who said that the impact of one of the witnesses' testimony, Kay Woodcock, that's Charles Vallow's sister, really, really stuck with her. And we saw Kay Woodcock on the stand describing the phone call she had to make to her siblings when she found out that her brother had been shot and killed by Lori Daybell's brother, and she found this out online. So to hear that testimony, they also said when they saw her and her hearing that guilty verdict, they did feel almost like a sense of relief. And now they feel like justice for Charles Vallow was served.
Yeah, and that's one of the sort of interesting twists in all of this as well. Remember that she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the killing of two of her children up in Idaho. And this entire case predates the murder of those children. But it does kind of bring to mind, or maybe the question comes to mind, I should say, that, why are we going through this? Why are we, having an entire jury in there and the court and prosecutors and everything going on when she's not getting out of prison for those previous charges, that previous conviction? And it really is, I'm told by criminal defense attorneys, to give the family of Charles Vallow a sense that his life mattered and that there is justice for him as well.
And everyone gets their day in court. The victims. And now I'm watching Charles Vallow's family, his sister, Kay Woodcock. They are approaching the cameras there. I think they are going to speak, so hopefully we can go
Let's go ahead
to
and
that.
listen in.
It was a relief, a long journey, and I'm just glad it's over with. I really am. My whole family is, my sisters, and I just want to thank everybody, the Arizona Prosecutor's Office, Trina Kay, and everyone else that was here and got us through it all. Our court advocates and the whole 9 yards. Today's a good day. We won.
Were you worried, Jerry, that the jury might come back with a not guilty at all, or were you pretty confident?
I had a little concern, but when it came back so quick, I pretty much knew that it was done.
What did you think of her demeanor during trial?
I thought she was kind of a smarty pants, not real. I don't know what word I'm looking for. I know which one I would use.
You're trying to be nice.
Right. I know which one I would use, but so anyway.
What did you think of her lawyering skills?
I thought she sucked.
You think she did herself any favors by being her own attorney?
Probably not. I'm sure the first day into the trial she wished she would have had an attorney.
You think?
A real attorney, right.
Did you look at her when the verdict was read?
I could see the back of her head.
And what was there? Did you have any reaction? Did she have any reaction?
I couldn't see, but she didn't shake her head or that I saw. So.
Okay, what did you think looking at her?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Come on, Kay, your turn.
I just saw the back of her head too. I couldn't see anything, and she didn't. A lot of times during court, she'd shake her head no when she didn't agree with something being said, or she would just shake her head no, and she didn't shake her head no. So
I guess that means she really did do it.
Closer to the, can you come closer to the mic?
Oh, okay.
Kay,
Sorry.
She seemed to really have a visceral reaction to you.
That's what I heard.
And when you were on the stand, what was that moment like for you?
I didn't know that she was that shaken by me being there. And then when I got off the stand, I really didn't even know what I said. And then once Jerry and my sister Susan and our friend Laura Ferris and who else was right there? And Colby was right there. And they were like, you did so good. She was shaking like a leaf when you, and I was like, what? No way. And it was, the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, okay. That's all I needed to know. That made my day. That of all the people she should be shaken for, and she was shaking about me, good. Yeah.
Okay. What did you think of the verdict when the verdict was read as guilty? What did you feel?
Oh, just 6 years of walking the pits of hell every day, and about halfway through, I realized, okay, I'm gonna make it through. But it was a long time. Elation. It was a long time before I got to that point, but it's still difficult, but it's okay. I'm ready to move on. It's time. We've got a 10-year-old granddaughter we're raising now, and I've got my hands full, and I'm real happy to be being her grandma. So
after 6 years, does it feel real after 6 long years of walking through hell, as you mentioned?
Yes, it feels real, because for about 3 years I didn't feel anything. I was totally just didn't feel anything, numb.
Does this feel like justice for Charles?
Yes, and the order in which it's happened, you know, this was the first incident, the first murder, and then everything up in Idaho, and then so Charles would have wanted, you know, take care of Tammy and the kids first, and get to me when they're ready. And so he would have been. He's fine, and I know that he's pleased with us, and excuse me, there's a bug. I know he's pleased with us, and I feel good.
We had a juror tell us that your testimony stuck with them. Exactly. And they even saw you after and felt like there was justice for your brother. What does that mean to hear that?
Great. Whatever I said, I struck a chord, and that's what I wanted to do. That's what I was trying to do, and I'm grateful. I mean, hey, the Lord gave us. This was thrust upon us, and our lives just went into like a tornado for a long time, and then getting to say things in the first 2 trials, and then getting to speak about Charles finally, because he's been so silent. And I mean, it's just been silent where he's at. I know people thought we forgot about him, and no way, you know. And but law enforcement never stopped. Like Lori said, they didn't stop, because I was right there behind with law enforcement here in Arizona, talking and saying, what's going on now? Tell me. You know, I was in contact with them nonstop. So I knew at some point, you know, it was going to happen, and then all the other stuff, and you know, I'm just glad we got to. I'm just glad this is done. Now we just have to get justice for Brandon, and I will be back. I can't stay the whole time for his, but I will stay as long as I can, kind of more towards the end of it, I guess, and because then it will truly be over. I say I've still got a little bit left before I can close my book, but when that's over, then I can close my book.
And Kay, I don't know if you noticed, I saw 2 jurors look at you as they were walking out. Did you notice that at all?
No, I didn't. I watched them walk in because I know that if they look at you when they're walking in, that's a good sign. And nobody looked at me, but I didn't see, so I didn't watch them walk out. I didn't think to look. So
What'd you think when Lori waived aggravation? What'd you think?
I really couldn't hear her because, you know, that baby talk she does, that baby voice.
Yep.
She needs to lose that, man. But I hope she grows up in prison and learns how to talk like a woman, you know, and not a baby. But anyway.
One of the jurors, the woman with the long hair, she said that she really just wanted to give you a hug. She's like, you know, afterwards, I really just wanted to give her a hug. Just
you know, in Idaho, all the jurors I've met from up there, from both trials there, that was the one thing they were like, I just wanted to hug you. I just wanted to hug you. So I hope I get to meet her. I hope she reaches out to me. Nate, if anybody calls you, give them my number. And just make sure they're a real juror. And yeah, I want to talk to them. Absolutely.
I was going to say, Kay, I'm wondering if there's anything you'd say to Lori at this point.
We got you, and you're not the smartest person in the room, and now it's time for you just to hide away. And well, after Brandon's trial, but you can just hide away, and everybody's going to forget about you. We'll be on our way through our life, and she'll be rotting in prison where she deserves to be. And
like Charles always used to say, love always wins.
Yeah.
So.
And oh yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, love always wins was Charles's thing, and yeah, so it does.
She described this as a family tragedy.
That is absurd. That was
when you heard that mantra over and over again.
And calling Charles my husband, whom she was hated at the time, whom she was ready to kill him. You know, it's like that just shows you what she's an actress. She turns on this persona and goes with it, and then boom, she turns it off, and then there's the real her, whatever the real her is. I sure never knew her.
Tell us a little bit, just for me, about Charles. You know, let's bring it back to him and his legacy.
Hey, you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, what was that?
If you could just
tell
us a
them
little
about
bit
Charles.
about Charles and his legacy and how you want us to think about him.
He was my big brother, you know. I followed in his footsteps. I did everything he did. He was only a year and 2 months older than me. So we hung around a lot. We had a lot of the same friends. He was a big influence in my life. And he was just a good dude. He was, all the way from a kid till when she killed him. So, you know.
What did it mean to hug Trina Kay at the end? What did that feel like? To hear the verdict and then give her a hug?
Well, I hugged her and told her I loved her because she did such a great job. And it felt good. It did.
And she did do a great job. And all the detectives and everybody that has worked on this case, from Nicole Byer to she's our victim advocate, and Trina and Nate Duncan and all the detectives that have come, and even we had a few visitors from Idaho that came, and that was welcome. And I got a thank you from not a thank you, I got a congratulations from Rob Wood, from the prosecutor in Idaho a while ago. And we have gained, we lost some dear family, we lost a lot, but we have gained family as well. So, you know, there's the silver lining. And even in the worst times of your life, there is something good there. You just take sometimes a little while to find it. But y'all, we're dying here.
And so,
Susan, do you want
Lauren?
to say anything? No, she
yes,
she
Jerry.
doesn't want to.
And as a parting shot, they got the bitch again. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank y'all.
Okay, so you have been listening to some of the family members expressing their emotions following the conviction of Lori Daybell here at Maricopa County Superior Court. One of the family members saying it's been 6 years walking the pits of hell to get to this point, saying if they could say anything to Lori Daybell right now, they'd say, "We got you, and you are not the smartest person in the room." They said that one of the things that Charles Vallow, her fourth husband, that she was just convicted of conspiring to murder, used to always say is that love always wins. And they said that is the emotion that they are feeling following this jury's decision. About 24 hours of deliberation on the part of the jury. They got the case very late yesterday. They sort of wrapped generally the court about 4:30 in the afternoon. They got the case around 3:30, met briefly, decided to pick it up again this morning, started deliberating this morning around 10:30 in the morning, broke for a brief lunch, and then came back this afternoon and announced they did in fact have a verdict. And that is what got us to this point. Javier, our Ashley Holden was in the middle of the scrum you just saw with the family members. We're going to talk to her shortly and get a debrief on everything that she heard from them one more time. But for now, I'll send it back to you in studio.
Yeah, it stood out to me, as you mentioned, that the younger brother said that Charles Vallow used to always say, "Love always wins," and the family sharing that sentiment that today they won. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. We'll have much more.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to our stream coverage. I'm Lillian Donahue. We've been kind of holding down the fort on the stream for all of this, but as you have been watching, Lori Daybell has been convicted of conspiracy to murder her former husband, Charles Vallow. You were hearing from Vallow's family members. You heard from some jurors as well, and they read that obviously the verdict just recently. So, I want to actually toss to the verdict if we can and see those final moments as they were shown in court. Maybe we can pull that up here just for a few seconds.
Arizona versus Lori Daybell. CR 2021-001704-001. Verdict, count one. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Lori Daybell, as to the crime of count one, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder occurring on or about July 11, 2019, guilty.
And there you go. You can hear that happening. I also want to bring back our Benjamin Taylor. He's been an incredible guest with us throughout this whole thing, helping us put things into context. You've had experience in murder cases and trials like this. Hearing that guilty verdict, what are you thinking right now after just 2 weeks we've been talking?
This was a very quick verdict, which we kind of expected. I mean, the jurors came back this morning. They had lunch. They came back this afternoon. So they must have just talked about a few things. They probably didn't go through every single piece of evidence. I mean, they might have skimmed through a lot of things, but I'm pretty sure the jurors probably already knew after sitting there for the past couple of weeks what their verdict was going to be. They probably just want to confirm, discuss a little bit, but the shock, there wasn't really much of a shock there, but I'm sure Lori Daybell, she might have been shocked, or maybe she wasn't, because she didn't really put on any evidence, didn't testify, didn't really put on much of a defense throughout this whole case.
And Ben, just in the past, 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, as we've been watching all of this unfold, especially outside of the courthouse, as people leave, the jurors leave, one of the jurors that they interviewed outside said that he was on the fence until yesterday, until closing arguments. We talked about this yesterday, that it was very possible that somebody was still on the fence because they had to, the prosecution had to, beyond a reasonable doubt, find her guilty of conspiracy. And conspiracy is difficult to prove if you don't have a smoking gun, text or call, or things saying time to do this now. But he said that all of the evidence eventually did make sense. And in that jury deliberation, they talked as adults and they came to that conclusion looking at the prosecution's argument, and even more so looking at the lack of an argument, the lack of a defense from Daybell. I mean, just talk about how important that was. Honestly, I think Daybell not having a defense was exactly what prosecution needed and wanted for this.
Yes, she representing herself, she not having a defense. And Lillian, like you said, that juror who was still in the holdout to the last few minutes or to the last day, that's very surprising. So that shows you that she must have done something in order for that one juror to have doubt. So if Lori Daybell would have still stuck with that juror, maybe looked in that juror in the eye and still focused on that juror, we might have had a hung jury based upon that one juror, because under the law, the prosecutor has to have unanimous, meaning all 12 jurors have to decide and say guilty. But it sounds like based upon your interview with that one juror, that juror was still trying to on the fence, which that could have been the holdout juror that Lori Daybell needed. But as you see, that juror did decide and came back with the rest of the group, with the rest of the 12.
And it's fascinating to put a face to the name of the person that I've been thinking about all day today, is like, oh, who's that one person? Well, we met him and we talked to him, and we talked to another woman that was also on the jury, and what she was thinking about. She said that she just wanted to give Kay Woodcock, Charles Vallow's sister, a hug. Something else I was also watching is I was watching Colby Ryan's stream. He was streaming on YouTube, and as this verdict went. And Colby Ryan is Lori Daybell's adult son. He's been very active in talking about all of this. And he said in his words that it's just been a long time coming. And the biggest sense right now is relief. And we heard that again from the family members, is the same word, that relief that is coming after a trial like this. How do you feel like that is shared amongst everybody in that courtroom? I mean, obviously not for Daybell, but for the others sitting there, when you're done with a murder case, what is the feeling like while you're walking out in your experience?
Yeah, so I've represented victims and I've represented defendants, both. But no matter who you represent, after a long week of trial or 2 or 3 weeks of trial, you are exhausted. Yes, you do feel relief. Waiting for that verdict, your gut is just twisting because you have no idea what these jurors are going to say or do. And jurors can do whatever they want. So this could have come back today, and it would have been everybody surprised that they're not guilty. So doing these trials, it is very gut-wrenching. And you have to remember, this case is not just 3 weeks. This case has been going on for years. So as an attorney, you're preparing for years and years of evidence, reading legal briefs, going through police reports, going through body camera footage, going through autopsies. So it's a lot of work. So to finally get till today, this day, I'm sure it's a lot of relief for the victims' families to know that Lori Daybell was found guilty.
Not just a relief for the victims' families and the prosecution, but also a relief for those jurors who had a big weight on their shoulders and a big decision. Ben, we're going to take a quick pause with you, and I want to actually toss to that full interview that we got live on air. You saw it on ABC15, talking to two of those jurors about what was going through their heads over the past 24 hours.
She didn't call any witnesses.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I don't get that.
Or why she didn't have, I know she made a statement about the only family that was interviewed was her estranged brother, and why wasn't her parents or her sister, but yet she didn't call them.
So, I mean, in saying that, she is not obligated to prove her innocence.
Exactly, yeah.
And you gave her that benefit of the doubt. She recognized she didn't have to put on the defense.
She knew.
Right.
She knew.
Was the fact that she didn't put up a defense or take the stand in her own defense part of your deliberation at all?
No. It was all evidence. It was all evidence that was produced and presented to us.
Sorry if this was asked. What would you say the biggest piece of evidence for you guys as a jury was when you came to the decision?
Well, for me, like her, it was text.
The text
were
history.
What specifically about the text?
I don't know.
Oh, there were so
I don't know
many.
if I can do that or not. Yeah, there was.
I mean,
there
we
was
had
two of them for
pages.
me that really stood out.
Can you tell us which ones? The Nephi.
Yeah, that was one of them. Soon you will be Nephi, and so will I. So that was one of them. But I don't know if I should say anything more than that.
We heard so much about dark spirits and religion and how this all plays into it. I mean, as a jury, what's going through your head when you start hearing that in court?
For me, that didn't really play a big role because you have to have evidence of conspiracy, and that is not evidence of conspiracy to me. To say somebody is
Was it
possessed.
unusual for you guys to? I mean, you're talking about her brother Alex, the guy who actually was the triggerman. So many players were referenced in this trial, and you never saw them and never heard from them. It had to be confusing when you guys got back in the jury room. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very confusing. It just felt like there was so much of the story that was missing.
Did she have any valid arguments, like anything that made you think maybe she's not guilty?
Do you want to answer? I can't think of any.
You know, honestly, up until yesterday, I would have said not guilty. But when the prosecutor, I don't know, what do they call that? When they give their
closing argument.
Yes, the closing
Connected
argument.
the
That's
dots.
really, there's a few things she said in there, and then when I looked them up today, I was like, oh yeah, that's bad.
And you were still on the fence yesterday.
I was yesterday. Yes.
Give us a sense of what it was like to be in that jury room. Was there a point that someone was disagreeing, saying that maybe she is not guilty?
Yes.
Were you guys
There was a couple.
And what was that like? Walk us through that.
It's just a matter of, adults working things out and going through all the evidence and figuring out, what we thought, what we were going to come to an agreement with. So
To learn now that everyone that was in that house that day, minus Daybell, is all not with us anymore, is dead or has been killed. I mean, what is that like to hear as jurors walking out?
Sad.
it was.
Like, I kept wanting to hear from Tylee.
I was going to ask, is anybody wondering why Tylee wasn't testifying?
Yes.
You were.
Did you ever ask the judge why aren't they here?
No. And the one witness that really got to me was hearing Kay. I was holding back my emotions.
That's some powerful sound there. Ben, tell me, what's your thoughts listening to that?
Well, I heard Ashley Holden, one of your ABC15 reporters, ask the question, how does it feel knowing that pretty much Lori Daybell's kids are not alive? And they were very, heartbroken. They were shocked because the viewers should know that jurors don't know all of the story. The reason why it is that because the judge makes sure that they want to have a fair trial. So you don't hear about the Idaho facts, the Idaho case, this case, and the facts that you hear about this case. So the jurors, you hear that one juror, the male juror was like, he was on the fence. I mean, he almost said not guilty.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of funny to me because it's like, I mean, a lot of people, I think we know more because we've been following this trial for many years. But you have to realize these jurors, they pick juror members who don't really know anything about this case, who only know about what they hear for the past couple of weeks. So this juror was on the fence. So that shocks me that this juror might have been, he said himself, that could have been a not guilty juror. And the female juror was saying the same thing, like she wished she had heard more. And that's interesting because I think that's what we viewers, we know a lot more than what is actually in the courtroom. And Lillian, we were talking about this too. All it takes is one or even two jurors to hold out. And we were wondering, what's it taking so long? And because of those two jurors, or even other jurors were even thinking not guilty. So that's very amazing to me. So that tells me that the foreperson or the other jurors must have twisted some arms in that room to get them on to their side to say, hey, look at this evidence. We believe that she's guilty. And the guy, he heard him from his own words, the juror turned and changed his own mind.
And at the end of the day, Ben, it comes down to, did the prosecution take all of the puzzle pieces of circumstantial evidence and actually create that picture that they were trying to create without the smoking gun? How do you paint that picture? How do you accurately show what happened without it? And they were saying that for them, at least that female juror, she said that her smoking gun, or what was the most powerful for her, were those text messages, were the words herself. And we were hearing that from many analysts, even including yourself, like that they would be relying on her and Lori Daybell digging her own grave in this one. And they talked about even the lack of information. Why is there not information? Why is she not taking the stand? I heard from the former prosecutor up in Idaho, and she told us she didn't think she was going to take the stand. She didn't think Lori was going to take the stand, because if she took the stand, then she was going to be putting herself in a place where she could potentially get asked questions where that information would be potentially leaked, or not leaked, but if she said something on that stand, unfortunately, if she said something that said, if she didn't plead the fifth left and right, it's very fascinating. And looking at all of it, Ben, what would you say makes this case so interesting, fascinating? Why do you care to pay attention to something like this?
I mean, it's a fascinating case because of all the religious factors, all the factors that you have multiple people who are dead. And there's still another case coming up in Arizona within a month from now. So I think people are glued to their TV sets, because how in the world did Lori Daybell orchestrate all this to have all these people murdered? One person orchestrated this to have all her family members murdered. And then she had multiple husbands. I think she had like 4 or 5 husbands she's had, and some of them, some of them have died, as we see, versus Charles. So it's just amazing how she's orchestrated all of this, and she's representing herself. So I think representing herself is one of those things that people are like, what in the world is she doing? And it's just very sensationalized of how she presents. So I think that's why people are glued to the TV set and wanting more of this case.
It's certainly been a very fascinating one, an interesting one to hear. Very solid presentation by the state. I mean, their closing arguments were 1 hour 45 minutes, and they laid it all out. They brought back evidence with all of that, and we know there's foreshadowing here. Brandon Boudreaux was in that courtroom today when they read that guilty verdict. And so for those who are just joining our stream, just to kind of catch everybody up on this, this is that the Lori Daybell case we've been covering for a long time. I mean, this whole saga started almost 6 years ago, where the state said that Lori Daybell had a role to play, an agreement with her brother, Alex Cox, to shoot and kill, to murder her former husband, Charles Vallow. And so as they went through this whole case, as they presented all the evidence, they brought up text messages and emails and phone pings and surveillance video of her getting stuff at Burger King. I mean, they went to such a detail with everything. And they had well over 12 I think they had well over a dozen witnesses come up to the stand, including friends and family members. And then you had insurance agents coming up and detectives coming up, all leading to that final moment. And I think we can play that one more time. I think it's definitely fair to watch as she gets that conviction read to her again, if we can pull that up and go back into the courtroom.
State of Arizona versus Lori Daybell. CR 2021-001704-001. Verdict, count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Lori Daybell, as to the crime of count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, occurring on or about July 11, 2019, guilty.
So now you've heard that. You've heard the guilty. You've heard it And we've done plenty of analysis after that. But in seeing this whole case play out, what would you say was the hardest thing Daybell was facing? Was it the prosecution or was it her own self?
Lillian, that's a great question. It's a little bit of both. I mean, the prosecution is the one who's bringing the evidence against her, so she has tons of evidence she's bringing against her. But Lori Daybell dug her own grave too by being her own attorney and not really knowing the law and not really taking the prosecutors serious. However, I'm still kind of going back to the jurors. I mean, the fact that she still had a couple of jurors in that jury room, still kind of figuring out what's going on, that tells you that even though she represented herself, she must have put in some piece of doubt in their heads. And I know her whole defense was, you didn't see me, you didn't hear me. So she had some jurors confused here. So, I mean, this could have been the other way. It would be really shocking if it was a not guilty all across the board, but it sounds like there's some jurors in the jury room who were discussing and still confused. So I know she didn't do a great job defending herself. However, she looks like she almost convinced a couple of jurors there to help her out.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that too, how close it got to that. But they did end up making that decision decently quickly. I mean, they had only 17 minutes yesterday, and then they came back at 10:30. They had an hour and a half break. So only a few hours of true deliberation there. And it didn't take too much for them to twist the arm. But we know that this is her first of second trials that she has here. So she already has a conviction here in Maricopa County. She's gonna have she'll have another trial to face. And that's going to be in the case of Brandon Boudreaux, who is her niece's ex-husband. It is another conspiracy to commit murder case. So saying that she tried to conspire to kill him as well. Do you think that anything that played out here is going to impact either how she brings herself to court or how the next trial works?
Yes, the interesting fact is that Brandon Boudreaux, he's actually in the courtroom. He's been watching this case, and he's a victim. And his case is coming up. So I think he's going to be ready. I mean, he's going to be ready. He sees how Lori Daybell has cross-examined. So if he takes a stand himself, which he probably will in his own case as a victim, he knows how she's going to present evidence. So it's going to be interesting to see if she decides whether or not she wants to get an attorney for her next case, or will she continue to represent herself? Because if she represents herself, it'd probably be the same sort of verdict we're seeing right now. But she might change her mind and say, hey, I want an attorney. And then that will definitely play in the factor of whether or not we go to trial within the next month or so.
Right. And, the big question that I keep seeing pop up left and right on comments and just I've heard even from friends talking about this. Well, she's already been convicted. She's already been convicted up in Idaho. She was already convicted of killing her 2 children. I mean, this is a very well-known case. Why even try? And we heard from family today, from Charles Vallow's family, about why. It's for them. It's for Charles Vallow. And even though she's currently serving 3 life sentences, she's not getting out of prison. For the family members, it's that level of justice to say that we took her to court for the conspiracy to commit murder for our brother. Is what Kay Woodcox and them said. So we are definitely going to continue working on this. Any final wraps, Ben, that you want to say that you think, people really should take away from this before we cut you loose?
I mean, one final wrap is, if you ever facing charges, never represent yourself. Never, ever represent yourself. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give as an attorney. I mean, this is an interesting case, and we're going to see, it continues. So never represent yourself. I think the prosecution did bring a lot of evidence. Lori Daybell tried her best here. She had a couple of jurors confused, but at the end of the day, Lillian, as you saw, as you said, she was found guilty. So those arms are twisted, and then she was found guilty.
Ben Taylor, thank you so much. Amazing local attorney here, and thank you for all of your analysis throughout everything. And we can let you hop off now. So, kind of bringing us back in here, she's been convicted, Lori Daybell, convicted of conspiracy to commit murder for Charles Vallow. And we were talking about just this whole trial, how the prosecution had to bring in all of these different puzzle pieces to create this picture without this big smoking gun of her flat out saying, yes, I worked with my brother to do this. They had to bring all of that circumstantial evidence in, whether it was financial, whether it was religious based, or it was, her worried about some sort of intervention, just all of these different things that we were hearing throughout the case. But we do have a clip of all of the highlights, right? So not everything for over the past two weeks, 2.5 weeks, but we have a highlight reel just to show a flavor of what it looked like. And the things you're going to see in this highlight reel is you're going to see Kay Woodcox, you're going to see the sister of Charles Vallow as she took the stand. You're going to see multiple detectives as they're discussing things. It's not super long, but it just gives the flavor of that back and forth that you saw throughout the past 2 weeks with Daybell as she was acting as her own attorney. Let's see if we can bring that up now.
Family tragedy is not a crime. Lori and Alex knew exactly when this murder would happen and where it would happen.
Did you see or hear or personally witness me conspire with Alex Cox to kill my husband, Charles Vallow?
No, but I saw a ton of evidence that did.
All these things all added up into that moment and that morning. No doubt in my mind that they killed him.
Either the shooting did not happen that close in time to the 911 call, or that she wasn't there for the shooting.
It was probably Ned before we got rid of him.
Did you ask me what I meant in those text messages?
I couldn't.
Okay. So you spent your whole date getting to know each other, talking about me.
Don't flatter yourself. No, we did not spend the whole time talking about you.
And you weren't really aware of the events that happened that morning, were you?
The morning of
July
his murder?
Of July 11th?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
Because you didn't tell me.
If we have heard testimony from Dr. Baumgardner that Charles Vallow, when he was shot in the heart, would have taken up to a couple minutes to die after he was shot in the heart, and Lori Vallow has told Detective Enclan that she left right after Charles was shot, would that mean that Charles Vallow just lay dead on the floor for 45 minutes before Alex Cox called 911 at best?
Yes.
There you have it. So you kind of hear all of that back and forth as Daybell was representing herself. You could also hear the prosecutor up there asking the question, to the lead detective at the time, based on the evidence that you showed today, does that make sense? Does that they called 45 minutes after the shooting happened? So some of the things I kind of walk through some of that evidence that the prosecution used in this case. They had forensic evidence from the gunshots. That was a big argument from prosecution, was that it couldn't be self-defense if the second gunshot was on the ground. If Vallow was already laying on the ground at that time, they had witness testimony from those who were there, first responders who were there, and said it looked like that second shot happened while he was on the ground. But then they came in with the 1-2 punch. The next day, they brought in the medical examiner and they said, hey, based on the autopsy, do you also agree with what the first responder said on scene, that the second shot was on the ground? And the medical examiner said, yes, it was something called a shore wound. So a shore wound means that when something goes in, it's the person is against a hard surface. And they believe that that hard surface was the ground. They even had a part of the floor that had that. And so they relied on that, saying to dismiss the whole claim of it was just a family tragedy. It was a horrible act of self-defense, even if Daybell didn't agree with what her brother did in self-defense, that it was still a tragedy. And that is what prosecution came back with and said, no, here's the physical evidence that can show that. Why would you need to shoot Vallow a second time while he's already on the ground laying there. And another thing that they talked about was Nephi and these texts of her saying that I need to be close. Daybell was texting her brother back and forth saying, I'm going to be like Nephi and you are going to be like Nephi. And in her faith, Nephi represented what the prosecution called a justified killing. And so, like I've been saying, it's not her exactly directly saying that we're going to do it at this time and here's how we're going to conspire to kill Vallow. But it is, I mean, it's as close as you can get from a perspective of somebody writing in code, writing in a religious code almost. But she also, Lori Daybell, when she was doing cross examination, tried to poke some holes into that, and her poking holes were basically saying, "Well, do you really know what that means?" And the detective's like, "Well, I haven't asked you." And she didn't take the stand to answer those questions. So there were a lot of things that weren't brought to the table that jurors couldn't look at. They couldn't really pay attention to that cross examination. They could, but they couldn't pay attention to what was not said, if that makes sense. And that's what that juror was talking about in the interview right after the verdict was read was she wanted to hear more. She wanted to hear a defense. She wanted to hear Lori defend herself and answer questions, but that wasn't there. And they couldn't look at that or talk about that. And so we have about a minute, a clip that we've been able to clip from Kay Woodcock. That's the sister of Charles Vallow. And remember, just after the verdict, they came outside, they talked to reporters. They said they have a huge sense of relief and justice. And the big question for here was why have the trial here? And for this family is the reason why. So let's see if we can pull that up with Kay Woodcock talking after the verdict.
I really couldn't hear her because, you know, that baby talk she does, that baby voice. Yep. She needs to lose that. We got you, and you're not the smartest person in the room, and now it's time for you just to hide away and, well, after Brandon's trial, but you can just hide away and everybody's going to forget about you. We'll be on our way through our life, and she'll be rotting in prison. You know, in Idaho, all the jurors I've met from up there, from both trials there, that was the one thing they were like, I just wanted to hug you. I just wanted to hug you. So I hope I get to meet her. I hope she reaches out to me. Nate, if anybody calls you, give them my number. And just make sure they're a real juror.
And there you have it. That's from Kay Woodcock. She took the stand early on, and it was a very powerful testimony when she was talking about her brother and talking about how it has impacted her family not having him in her life. And also talking about, though, how she truly believed in her gut that Lori Daybell was guilty, that although she did not directly see that physical evidence of, I know exactly what you did, I know exactly that you conspired with your brother to kill my brother, she still said on the stand that all of the evidence so far points directly to that. And then you see today her finally having that final say, her and her brother being able to talk about Charles Vallow, about who he was, but then also about their thoughts as they were sitting in the courtroom and as they were watching Lori Daybell represent herself throughout this whole time. And going back to that juror, as she was talking on the stand during this trial, we couldn't see the jury, so we wouldn't know. But I assume, and based of what we've heard from some of the jurors finally, is that it was extremely emotional for them. And that one of the jurors that we spoke to said they wanted to give her a hug. They just wanted to go up to the family and let them know. But obviously you can't do that. You have to let justice play out. And that is what has happened in this case, is that justice has played out. And then, let's talk next steps here, right? So next steps, you have the guilty verdict. And then you have, prosecution celebrating, you have family celebrating, you have all of this happening. But don't forget, this is the first of 2 trials in Arizona. So this is not over this one's over, but not the next one. And the next one is for a charge of conspiring to murder Brandon Boudreaux. That's the ex-husband of Daybell's niece. And so that's going to be fascinating as well, because that's kind of a lesser known, not as high profile. I really am interested to see the evidence that comes out about that conspiracy, and to see if there are any questions or thoughts, and see how this might impact that case. Granted, though, the jurors have to be impartial. So you can't have jurors that have, are the true crime buffs that have been following this and know exactly every single conviction and what has happened. So we'll definitely be able to see that. But that is the next step, is going to be to see what happens in the second case here in Arizona, to see what she does. If Lori Daybell represents herself, if she asks for a lawyer, all of that's to be seen in the future. Certainly and we heard this from our analyst, has nothing to lose. She's already serving 3 life sentences, and has just been convicted of another conspiracy for murder. But walking us through, trying to tie a bow on all of this, is this whole trial has been something that was for Charles Vallow's family, was for the justice that they say he deserved. And it was fascinating to watch Lori Daybell, represent herself. It was fascinating to see the prosecution lay out their argument in a way that would make sense to an everyday person who has never heard about Lori Daybell before, and bring all of those puzzle pieces together to make a full picture. And eventually that picture came to be a verdict of guilt. But there was 1 to 2 jurors, as we heard from the jury. There was at least one that was on the fence all the way up until closing arguments. And that just shows how important every single moment in court is, and every single step, process, and opportunity is to a jury. So I just want to thank you guys for following along with this, and we will continue coverage as the next case happens, and we'll continue to follow up and get analysis. And our Ashley Holden is also doing a great job with Arizona Crime Uncovered. So we want to thank you guys for being a part of this, and feel free, send us questions and things that you want to see addressed, especially as well. So talking about Daybell, wrapping up on Daybell, she's going to be they're going to be going into that next trial as well. And we will be doing that too. So Arizona Crime Uncovered will be live tomorrow with Ashley. She's going to wrap this trial. She's going to talk about this trial again. I hope you guys tune in for that as well, because she is doing such a good job on that show. And we will hope to see you tomorrow for Arizona Crime Uncovered. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Arizona versus Lori Daybell, CR 2021-001704-001, verdict count 1. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Lori Daybell, as to the crime of count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder occurring on or about July 11, 2019, guilty.